Okay, so today we are prepping for our lab for tomorrow or Friday, which will be a spring roll that you will be making. The things you are going to need for your practice for today and for tomorrow's or Friday's lab is a chef's knife, a cutting board. You'll need your Play-Doh. I also posted in the under materials in your Google Classroom is a list of basic knife cuts. Today we're going to be talking about the large dice and the julienne. A large dice is like a cube, typically used for potatoes, starches, sweet potatoes, things like that. And then the julienne, which is or sometimes called a matchstick, is a long thin, which we will be using for the spring roll. So you can either print one out for your own reference or just pull it up on your iPad as you work, just to keep that in mind for your sizes. The very first thing I'm going to do before I start with this is wash my hands. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, and Z. Now I know my ABCs. Next time won't you sing with me? And dry them thoroughly. Okay. So I have my cutting board here. In the classroom, it's more of a mat for you to use, but it's still a cutting board. And your chef's knife. In the classroom, the chef's knife comes in something called a sheath, just like a sword would go in. And when you are removing your knife from the sheath, you always pull the sheath away from the knife, as opposed to the knife away from the sheath. You see the difference? So my knife stays still, I pull the sheath off, versus where I could cut someone or hurt someone. So pull that sheath off, set it to the side. You do not want your sheath to get wet. They can't be opened. So if we get moisture in there, sometimes bad bacteria can grow. Okay, so we're going to start with our Play-Doh first. This is for practicing. Now, if you don't have a chef's knife at home to practice, that's okay. You could use a little knife. But if you do have a chef's knife, that's awesome. Or an older knife, maybe, for the Play-Doh. So, handle, blade. My blade is currently down. When you are gripping your knife, you are going to grip here and then pinch with your pointer and thumb here, so it looks something like this. You can also hold like this if you'd like, or like this, but holding like this gives you the most control. And when we cut with a knife, we are always going tip down. It's like a rocking motion as opposed to a straight chopping motion. So I'm going to take my clay and I'm going to make a round shape, because there are no, unless they are produced in a factory with special molds, there is no food that's grown naturally square. So we have a round cylinder here of Play-Doh. And the first thing we always want to do when working with fruits and veggies is to get a straight edge, to get something flat to put against the cutting board. So the first thing I'm going to do is cut my Play-Doh in half long ways. I put my tip down along the cutting board and I rock my knife down and into the Play-Doh. I take my other hand. Now I am left-handed, so I do everything with my left and brace with my right. You may be the opposite of this if you are right-handed. Put your hand across. My fingers are out of the way of the blade, as well as these two fingers. They're not underneath the blade. They're holding the sides. And I'm just going to rock my blade down and then back up. Now the Play-Doh will stick. Not all foods will stick. And now I have a flat side to my Play-Doh, so I can easily put it down flat on the cutting board. For the dice, we're going to be doing a large dice, which is 3/4 by 3/4. This is roughly about 3/4. It's typically the size of your thumbnail. You are going to come down, turn this way, you're going to come down and you're going to cut 3/4 inch pieces. The Play-Doh likes to stick. And you're just kind of eyeballing it. It doesn't need to be perfect. If we were making a little bit of a medium dice, or if your piece was bigger or fatter than mine, fatter than 3/4, you're going to cut this in half again, putting my tip down and cutting in half. Flat side was down. I'm going to then put my Play-Doh back together so that I have the two pieces touching each other, and I'm going to cut my 1/2 inch dice down. So see, I'm rocking down. My fingers on my right hand, as I'm holding the food down, are curled under. The reason we do this is when the knife comes down, if it's going to hit our hand, it's going to hit these knuckles here as opposed to our fingertips. So we curl our fingers under and let the knife kind of rest along them and rock back up. Rock back up. And I'm moving my hand as I go. And your food won't stick like Play-Doh, but that's the idea. And so you can practice that. You can practice as many times as you want. If your Play-Doh is a little dry, you can add a little bit of vegetable oil or baby oil to it. I tried to give you guys ones that weren't too dry, but you know, there's a lot of you and one of me. So do the best you can. Now we're going to work on the julienne. A julienne is like a matchstick. So once again, I always want to get to a flat surface first. So I have my cylinder. I'm then going to cut it in half. Then I'm going to cut it in half again. Then I'm going to turn my halves to the side that I just cut and put that down. And then using my fingertips are curled under, my blade is here, I'm going to cut down in long, thin strips. And if your juliennes are still fat on when they fall, if they're still fat or fatter than 1/4 inch, you can come back again and cut that in half. The reason we cut these so long and thin, especially for a spring roll, is because for the palate you don't want a huge chunk of carrot or a huge chunk of cucumber at one time. You'd rather have almost like shreds of. So the julienne creates a nice bite or feel in your mouth as opposed to like a big chunky dice of carrot or cucumber. So my fingers are curled under, I'm coming down and rocking. Down and rocking. This goes a lot faster with food that does not stick to your knife like Play-Doh does. But this is a good way to practice without wasting a ton of food. If you want to practice at home with real food, you're welcome to. Please eat it though, don't throw it out, don't waste food. So you can see this one's a little fat, even after I julienned it this way. And then see it's still fat on this long side, so I'm going to cut that now in half. And take your time, make sure your fingers are out of the way of the blade at all times. And that is your julienne matchstick. Once you've played around with that for a little bit, I'm going to go wash my knife. Make sure you wash